Corey Hart, nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, sir.
How's it going? As if we haven't been talking about Ron Hynes the entire time leading up to this moment.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you, sir.
Congratulations on the Canadian Music Hall of Fame.
That's the first time someone's ever said that to me, so thank you.
Tell me about getting the call.
Well, I got the call from Alan Reed,
President of
the
Caris,
president of Caris,
yep.
and truthfully, I had no idea why he wanted to speak to me because I'd never spoken to him before. We'd never even met. And I had received an email a couple days earlier saying that he wanted to chat with me about an opportunity. So I was thinking perhaps it was, I haven't been on the Junos in a long time, perhaps he had heard that I was putting on a new record and it was something that they wanted me to do, maybe present or something like that. So when he told me that, I remember the phrase, he said, we have the distinct honor of informing you that you've been selected to be inducted into Canada's Hall of Fame. And when the words came out, I was a little incredulous. It was like, I think I heard him wrong. And then I said something like, excuse me? And then he repeated it again. And then I literally welled up. Like, I got very emotional because I didn't expect that.
No?
No. Truthfully, I didn't. I'm deeply humbled and grateful for it, but I think, you know, sometimes when you don't expect something and then the information comes to you, you interpret it, and if you're sensitive, which is the way I am, I felt like crying. I welled up. Mm-hmm. So my voice cracked a little bit, and then we had a lovely conversation, and I was just extremely touched that I would be recognized that way.
What I'm so curious about with you is how it's seemingly from day one, and I don't mean day one of your album, I mean kind of like day one of you being conscious. You've had your eye on the prize, or at least you've wanted to make music. And I heard this story about like you being in Miami and being discovered by like Tom Jones and Paul Anka. What's the story there?
When I was a young boy, I used to listen to the radio. I used to fall asleep listening to the radio, to Top 40 radio. Yeah. And we were living at the time in Florida, in Miami. I listened to a station called WQAM, which was a little AM Top 40 station. Yeah. And I'd sing in front of the mirror with my ruler, and I would not think that I was going to be a singer, but I thought, wow, this music is my refuge. This music that I'm listening to really makes me happy. And my sister, my older sister, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, so she wouldn't like me to say how old she is, but she's a little older than me.
Sure. It's very kind of you, by the way. That's very nice of you.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, now I say I'm the youngest of the 5, but that still makes me ancient in today's time. But back then, so she knew Tom Jones. She's a figure skater, and she had met Tom Jones, and they'd become friends. And she told him, she says, you know, my little kid brother, he sings all the time with the radio, and he's kind of cute, little kid, and he's skinny and everything, but he sings, I think he sings well. Would you listen to him? And it was unbeknownst to me that they were having this conversation, and then, because my sister didn't live at home anymore, she's older, so it was Christmas time, and she was visiting, and she said, I want you to sing just what you're doing right now in the room. I want you to come sing for somebody. Yeah. And it was Tom Jones.
What'd you sing?
I sang Ben by Michael Jackson. And I was so scared. I didn't know who he was, but I still was scared because they were all freaking out saying I was going to be singing for this legendary Welsh singer. Right. And there's no Google or internet at that time, so it was like, I was 11. Yeah. And but I was so scared that my knees were shaking, so I knelt down when I sang. I was on my knees, literally, the whole time. Brought my little 45, I played it, and I sang on my knees, and I sang to him, and then he said, that's good, but he said, I really can't help your little brother. He said, I think that my friend, Paul Anka, would be the right person to help him. Maybe have a listen to what he's doing, because Tom didn't write his songs. And Tom thought this would be a good thing for Paul to listen to. So 3 or 4 days later, then I met Paul. Mm-hmm. And Paul became a mentor for me when I was a young boy.
You still talk?
We spoke 2 years ago. I was inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame, and he did a nice tribute for me on the video, and I used to call him the painter, and I signed something for him. It's one of his songs. And if you listen really close to my music, I went to the piano because of Paul. I did a few songs with him when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, and then I started wanting to write my own music. But if you listen really closely to some of my early songs and some of the phrasing, there's a little bit of Anka in my DNA.
I know, and then one of your concerts, I think it was your big concert in Montreal a few years back, you did My Way, which Paul wrote.
Yeah, Paul wrote the English lyrics to it. It's a French song.
It's Now or Never or Sole Mio, right?
No, it's Je me reviens or quelque chose comme ça. It's
it's Now or Never. It's Sole Mio, the Elvis.
Yeah, it's not Now or Never.
Yeah,
but it's he used to spend summers. His wife was French from France, and he had heard that song over there, and he wrote a brilliant lyric for it.
So take me, how does it end up with you sending demos to Billy Joel? Like how does Billy Joel?
We are going through the whole life, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so it's rare that we get to do it.
Well, so as I said, Paul was an early influence, and then I started growing up as a teenager. I started listening to other music, and I listened a lot to Billy Joel. I liked Billy Joel a lot, and I listened to the Police. And Billy Joel was playing at the Montreal Forum in Montreal. I just said that.
But the old Forum, yeah.
I think I was 17 years old, and I thought, I'd love him to hear what I'm doing. And I thought, you know what? How about I just record a cassette of about 5 or 6 of my songs, and bring them over to the Montreal Forum and write it address it to each of the band members,
right,
and to Billy himself, Mr. Joel. And what have I got to lose, right?
Sure.
I mean, in life you have to try things, and if there's a door in front of you, you got to find a window. And if the window's closed and the door's closed, then you got to go through the roof.
Yeah, but Corey, that's so rare.
It's
like so many people want to be musicians, but they don't have that. This is what I was talking about. What I find so interesting is that you did it.
Well, it was my oxygen. Music was my oxygen.
Yeah.
And I would spend all my weekends, all my days writing and writing and writing. And my mom she's the one that she really believed in me, and she encouraged me. And I'm sorry.
Listen, man.
It's because
I get it. I understand.
And so, anyways, she was saying you keep fighting and you keep doing what you're doing because you're good. And because my parents split up, so I didn't have a dad around. So my mom was a very influential force. She passed away. That's why I'm emotional.
I know. Listen, I get it, man. I understand.
In any event, so yeah, there's a Jewish word for it. I think it's called chutzpah.
Yeah, I'm sensing that.
Yeah. And
so you addressed this to
I addressed it to the 5 members of the band and to Mr. Joel, and I went to the concert. I was up in the rafters. I saw the show. I loved the show.
What tour was that? What was it around? Like?
It was 1980.
Right.
1980. And April of 1980, and I turned 19 in May 31st. The show was in May, so I was about to turn 19. I was 18, and. Anyways, I got a call around 1 in the morning from somebody in the band. And he said, I listened to your cassette. And I was like, who is this? And he said, it's Richie Canada. He's the saxophone player, the terrific saxophone player. And I was like, holy shit, somebody listened to that little cassette. It was just vocal, piano on a little cassette. That's it, with my name and my number. And he said, come to the hotel. We're having some drinks. And I was like, I got on my bike and I just drove over. The hotel wasn't far from where we lived. And I went over there and I talked to him and he was like, I never said how old I was. And then they were like, when they saw me there, they were saying, "I don't even think you're allowed in here. Does your mom and dad know you're out?" and stuff like that. I was like, because I was 17, I was about to turn 18.
But you got to hang out with your heroes. You got to hang out with.
Yeah, I did. And anyways, long story short, I went down and spent a summer in Long Island. I was playing with his band. I recorded with his band. I got to meet Billy Joel at the studio. I spent time there. And that was actually the first time I ever got paid, because I played in a little piano bar that no one was listening to what I was singing. Even when I played Billy Joel songs, they weren't listening. Mm-hmm. And if you're in Long Island and you're playing Billy Joel songs and they're not listening, you're not doing very well.
Well, what was the goal, Corey? Like, what did you imagine being a professional musician was going to be like? Like, what was that the intention?
Oh, it was.
Was fame the intention?
No, it wasn't fame. It was wanting to share my songs. I was a songwriter, and I realized that I was a songwriter when I was 13, 14 years old. You're either born a songwriter or you're not. I don't believe that you can be taught to write songs. And I think that it's a special gift that you have in your DNA. And obviously you improve, and you should always improve, and there's no perfect songwriter, and I'm far from being a perfect songwriter.
But the goal is the craft.
But the goal was the craft, and to respect my craft, and to work at my craft, and to be passionate about my craft.
So then First Offense comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Sunglasses at Night becomes the biggest song in the world. And it was a late addition to the record, right?
Mm-hmm. It was added. Well, the record was done. I spent the spring of '82 recording in England. I wanted to work in England because I told you I was a big Police fan, so I just loved all the music coming out of the UK at that time. So we went over there, and I had two incredible producers that worked with me, Phil Chapman and John Astley. They had worked with Clapton, and they worked with The Who, and taught me so much. And they were very patient with me, because I was really green. I didn't really know what I was doing. Yeah. And I'd really never spent time in a studio before. And so we recorded the whole record. I came back to Canada, and then the record company were pleased with the results, and they said, we're going to schedule the release of this record called First Offense. And then I wrote Sunglasses at Night, and I really pleaded with the record company to send me back.
Is it because this is what I'm curious about. Is it because, do you know deep down this is going to be a very, very successful song? Like, is that why the phone call goes to, I want to put it back on the record? Like, this has a good shot? This has a good shot for me?
I don't think we ever know. I think that it's self-delusional, to think that you know what's going to be a hit or what's not going to be a hit. If everybody knew what was going to be a hit, everybody would be just...
Yeah, we'd all have hits.
I think anyone that's in music would just be having hits. So it's a special, alchemy that works. But I felt that the song had something special to it, that I pleaded with the label to let me go back. And to their credit, they sent me back to England to record it.
That's a big song, man.
It changed my life.
How do you feel about it? How did you, well, let me ask you this first. When I think about the success of the song, I also think about the video. And before we sat down, you and I were talking about our friend Laurie Brown, mm-hmm. who I've worked with at CBC, and who was in a couple of your videos, but was in the Sunglasses at Night video. The Sunglasses at Night video won the Juno for Best Video in 1984. I was talking to our producer earlier. And
that was the first one, by the way.
The first video?
The first video ever awarded at the Junos.
You were being compared to James Dean in the press.
Peter Goddard, he was a writer for the Toronto Star. And well, I mean, there were others, but I think I don't know if you remember him.
No.
You're too young.
You
remember him, right?
I didn't grow up in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
See, yeah. We still had broadsheets tossed off the boat in Newfoundland, Someone would yell, "Hear ye, hear ye."
Oz FM.
Oz FM, absolutely.
I love Oz FM. I love Oz FM.
Yes, the Rock of the Rock.
Yeah, the Rock of the Rock. I love Oz FM.
Well, how much of the success of that song do you think had to do also with the video?
Well, I think at that time in music, MTV was just this burgeoning explosion of another form for people to hear and see music that record companies were running with, and it was just the timing of that song. By the way, that video, we shot that video in Toronto at the old Don Jail, and Laurie Brown was terrific. That's the first time I really ever saw myself in front of a camera, because unlike nowadays where everyone grows up, you know, with their iPhones and filming and taking Snapchat stories and Instagram stuff, like I didn't know how I would look on camera. And I was really shy, but when the music started, and Rob Courtley, who directed and won the video for the Video of the Year for that song, we ended up collaborating on a lot of videos together. He was a friend and a mentor to me, and he deserves so much credit for the success of that video. He actually invested his own money in that video because he believed so much in me and in the song.
As an artist, when a song gets that big, does it change your relationship with it? In that moment, I'll talk about now in a second, but like then, were you getting tired of it? Were you?
No, I never got tired of it. I mean, there's certain songs that I wished I had written them better. I wished I had sung them better. I don't like the way I sang on my first couple of records. Later on, when I ended up producing other artists, an artist that I worked with, one of the greatest singers of all time, Celine Dion, I was so focused on doing my job properly as a producer that I wished I had applied a little bit more of that skill or technique to the work that I was doing with myself. I was really more content to just sing it a few times and then think that that was it, instead of really working it.
Now, when you look back at that song, I'm always really curious as to an artist's relationship, because there's not many like you. There's not many songs like that.
Thank you.
There's a handful of them. And I'm always really curious when I speak to the odd few people who have them, what's their relationship with them as they get older, as they get farther away from them?
Well, it never ceases to amaze me how many different genres of musical artists have covered that song, from whether it's operatic or heavy metal. It's huge heavy metal in Finland and Sweden and Germany. There's a yodel version of it, there's country versions of it, there's so many different jazz versions of the song. So as a songwriter, the greatest compliment is when someone, we were talking about Ron Hines and Sonny's Dreams.
Great Newfoundland songwriter,
the great Ron Hines, and I recently sang his song when I played there. And as a songwriter, the greatest compliment I feel is, well, there's two. When the audience sings with you, something that you wrote, and when another musical artist decides they want to interpret it in their own way. So the song, I mean, the song has also been grabbed and pirated and interpolated all over the place, which is a whole nother set of circumstances. But songs are like your kids, you know? Sometimes they misbehave.
I say that because I've also had artists say the exact opposite. I've had artists say to me that when a song is like your kid until it gets that big, and then it's not your song anymore. It belongs to everybody else.
Well, there's a truth to that. It does belong to everybody else, but you're still the parent. Which songwriter says that?
Who did I have? Radiohead said that about Creep. You know, and they wrote a song about it. They wrote a song called My Iron Lung. About how they had written this song and it had just gotten away from them entirely, and then but yet it had weighed them down.
They disassociated with it at a certain point?
Yeah, but then they came back to it. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, like you said, there's not. So
it was a runaway, that rebellious teenager, and the song came back.
Found its way back. Yeah. As a musician, as a really talented writer, producer, instrumentalist, as a musician, was it ever frustrating to be a famous pop star?
Listen, every musician, I believe, I can't speak for every musician, but I only speak for myself. I just say that we are so lucky to do music, to be involved with music, to be around music, to have music be our life's work. And there are two things that I always wanted to do when I was a young person, and that was music and to have a family and be a dad to my kids. Those were the two pillars the foundational pillars of my life. So I think that, there are times in the heyday of the 80s when I felt I think, you know, people were talking a lot about the image and not talking so much about the music. And being young, I felt somewhat, okay, a bit obscured that they're just looking at the image.
Right.
And they're not looking at the music. But it isn't woe is me or play the violins. No, it's nothing like that. It's just like, oh, you know.
I hear what you're saying, and you're right, and that stuff comes as you get further away.
And the older I got, and as I developed my songwriting, and as I wanted to keep improving, and what I was saying to you earlier, that I think it's so important to respect your craft, to honor your craft by not being complacent with your work habits and with your pursuit of excellence. And there is no excellence in music. There is no ultimate excellence. I mean, there's just the pursuit of it. And that's what keeps all of us, well, that's what keeps me trying to get there. And we will never get there.
I think it's something that a lot of us forget when we speak about musicians, not as musicians, but when we speak about musicians, is that musicians are actually making things. There's a craft. There's an art outside of just being famous. Speaking of Canadian fame, or success, I should say, so you won a Juno for Never Surrender. That album, Boy in the Box, went diamond in Canada. You were only the second Canadian to sell 1 million albums. Did it feel like you were breaking barriers specifically for Canadian music back then?
I did. I felt that at that time, it's interesting because my history, First Offense came out in Canada in November of '83.
Right.
And it had a mild success. I mean, we talk about how Sunglasses at Night was the first single with such a hit record, but it only peaked at number 27 in Canada. It wasn't even a top 20 record.
I remember I read you saying that.
And
that's so funny to me.
Yeah, and I remember it had sold around 11 or 12,000 copies of the album. It's not a lot.
By the way, these days?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's like 20 million.
I think 11 or 12 albums altogether is pretty good these days, you know?
Yeah. And you're right. But now you have 1 billion streams.
You're right.
Like
Hey, sorry, continue on.
Yeah. So I was fortunate that I had some strong believers that tried to get me an American record deal. And I think that, I don't know exactly why in Canada things didn't happen when it first started, but it didn't. And my success in the United States in the summer of '84 with the single really changed the model. It was a game changer for me. And then the artists that had come before me, artists like Loverboy that had American success, there was just a handful. Bryan Adams, another one. And those artists were great inspiration to me because there was just a few from the early '80s that I could say, they're doing it, so maybe I got a shot at it.
Yeah, I feel like you and Brian were always talking about together back then. At least in the press I could see.
We were, well, Montreal, Vancouver, and yeah, it was like Nadal and Federer.
Oh,
Except Brian always won.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, he deserved it.
I saw him just a couple of months ago.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's sweet. I've never met him before. He's a nice fella.
Yeah.
And again, another, like yourself, just this incredibly rare condition of that kind of fame. I spoke to Niall Horan from the band One Direction a little while ago, and I was asking him a little bit of the same stuff we're talking about because I'm always very interested, especially in a time where fame is...
How old is he?
Niall's probably, 23, 24? Yeah. I think right now we're having a great analysis of fame because now people are being famous for the strangest things and people are being famous for
being famous.
Yeah, exactly, right? So we're having a lot of deep conversations around fame, even especially on this show. So I asked him some questions and I think he gave me a lot of the responses of like, I'm very grateful to get to do what I do and I'm very blah, blah, blah. And I said, listen, I hear you and I believe you, but I bet it's kind of scary. And he said, yeah, sometimes when you're in the back of a limo and people are jumping on top of the limo, it gets scary. And I thought of you. And I can tell you're an incredibly grateful person, and that's such a noble trait. But I bet it's scary to be as famous as you were back then.
Well, yeah, I think that there's no school or preparation for it, and with the advent of MTV back then, literally you could go from being a complete unknown face to being mobbed in airports or being mobbed wherever you would go. And I had a really frenzied female demographic that just, really went to town with it. And at some point, that's what Boy in the Box was about, feeling a little bit trapped and not being able to come out. Because at a certain point, I did feel afraid.
Afraid of what?
Afraid
for your safety, or afraid?
Yeah, afraid for my safety. Afraid to just. I mean, it just came with the territory. It just came with that type of a fame that I had, and when people would find out where I lived, and I was hardly home anyways, but or hotels, I'd always go in through the back door because you couldn't go to the front door, and it was like my life seriously changed, 84, 85, 86, in that type of, I suppose, like a One Direction would go through. And, but yet again, it was part of my history, and now I look back on it and I think it was silly. I had nothing to be afraid about, but no one would purposely want to hurt me. It's just, I guess they'd maul me, and it was just the way it was.
When you look at the Justin Biebers and Ariana Grandes and Shawn Mendes's now, do you have a greater empathy for them?
Well, I think that, empathy, I think that anyone that's going into the music business needs to go in with open eyes and understand that it comes with the territory. And with social media now, there's a whole nother, landscape opening up for an artist to deal with it. But sure, I have empathy for them that they've lost their privacy. But if you don't like working on the farm, then don't be a farmer. Mm-hmm. So it just comes with it.
It does. It comes with the territory.
It comes with it, and
right,
it's like there's no whining. Mm-hmm. Like, accept it.
I'm going to go back to something you said just before, 'cause it's sticking with me, but if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine too. When you mentioned, the Sunglasses Night actually didn't do that well in Canada, and it was in the United States when it broke, the things started really starting to happen. I mean, I have here that you were nominated for 21 Junos, but only awarded 2. Did it feel like you were being snubbed by Canada?
Well, it was because I was in the same category as Brian most of the time, so it's like I really didn't have much of a chance. No, I never felt I was being snubbed. I felt that after Sunglasses at Night was a success in America, that Canada embraced me wholeheartedly, and have never looked back, embracing me. So no, an award is an award. It's not indicative of a country's appreciation or non-appreciation. They're wonderful, and they make you feel terrific. But it's the longevity of your career and the longevity of what you want to do and the integrity of what you do that matters most, not an acknowledgement that you are better in that particular season or deemed better in that particular season than 4 of your other competitors.
Right. I understand.
So that's kind of how I feel about it. One of the things about the Junos that was really upsetting to me was that in 1988, I had an album called Young Man Running and a song called In Your Soul, which was a top 5 record in Canada. It was one of the songs I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
And the label never submitted any nominations for me in 1988.
Why not?
You can ask them.
I got some work to do.
And then in 1990, 2 years later, I had another album called Bang, and another top 10 single called A Little Love. And again, they never submitted any of my nominations. Right. And that year, because it happened a second time, they took out a full-page ad in one of the trade papers apologizing to me for doing that. So, I don't know, the 21 may have been 31 had they sent in some submissions for me, but it is a song on the new record where I refer to, it's a song actually called First Rodeo, and it features Jim Cuddy on it.
The great Jim Cuddy.
The great Jim Cuddy. Mm-hmm. and he references that record in the verse that he sings. He calls me Young Man Running. And but you'll have to listen to the song and you understand. But it kind of references a little bit that period of time with the Junos.
You mentioned you worked with Celine Dion a little bit earlier in our chat. You wrote Miles to Go Before I Sleep, Where's the Love on Let's Talk About Love, and Prayer on A New Day Has Come. Was writing for other artists a way to continue your career without having to be so much in the spotlight, to be able to step out of the box a little bit, as you said earlier?
Well, in 1998, I had 2 little girls. In 1999, our third was born, River, and I realized that I couldn't make records and tour anymore.
So this is when you kind of stepped away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I stopped in 1998, and I had started writing songs. I wrote those songs for Celine in '97. I was very fortunate to be asked to write for that album.
They're great songs.
And she's a wonderful lady, a wonderful person, very sincere person.
I've never met her, but what a voice, man! I can't I can't even begin to think about it.
Yeah. Well, before we started the recording, there was a lot of people. We did the recording in New York, and I was producing the track. And normally she takes the track and she starts singing with it, and the producer does what he likes to do with her in terms of direction. But I wanted to just play it on the piano for her and have her sing, so I could just hear how she was phrasing it, and it was out of her comfort zone. But she was gracious and said, "All right, that's what he wants to do." Right. I don't know if she liked it or not, but
Corey, that decision to step away, there's a lot been made of it, and you've talked about it a lot. But is it an immediate thing? Do you wake up one day and say, you know, if I want to be a good father to these kids, I got to stop, or is it just something you think about for a while?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up not knowing my dad, and I felt that I could not reconcile the world that I had known as a singer-songwriter, as a recording artist, as someone completely dedicated to his career, being able to be present every day with my children. Because it's not a 9-to-5 job, it's a very egocentric, focused, selfish profession. And that's not a pejorative term about being a musician, but for me, you have to be very, very focused.
It's the reality.
It's the reality, and so something had to give. I definitely did not want to be a tourist dad. I wanted to be there every day for my kids. And that doesn't make me a super dad, it just means that my kids know that I was there.
Right.
And whether at the end of the day they say I did a good job or did a bad job, I was there, and I was there.
Yeah, I only talk about this as much as you want to. But yeah, I see the connection that your dad wasn't around when you were growing up, and you need to fill that need a little bit.
You see, my dad taught me something inadvertently. You know, my dad also, he wasn't a bad man. He just didn't feel it was important to be there, to be present in his children's lives. And because I was the fifth, so by the time I was born, I saw him once a year for maybe 3 or 4 days, and that was it. So there was no interaction, there was no communication, there's not many memories. And so it shaped me. He inadvertently gave me a great gift, not knowing he was, because I said, I'm gonna not replicate his pattern, I'm gonna do the opposite of what he did. And I decided that very early on. I decided that
I understand
that when my children were born, that I was gonna be there for them, and I was gonna raise them with Julie, and we were gonna be together and do that. So he taught me that, and I'm grateful for that.
I hear that you didn't raise your kids with them knowing how famous you are.
No, they had no idea. they
Corey, I find that really funny.
Yeah. They never saw me do it.
Right.
They never saw me perform. How long has YouTube been around?
I think YouTube's been around. I think I first saw my first YouTube video when I was in my first year of university, and that means I was 18. I'm 31 now, so I'll say it's at least 14, 15 years old.
Okay. Well, my oldest is 23, and the second one's she's 21, and then 19, my 3 girls, and my son's 14. So yeah, when they were little kids, they had no idea. And as they got older, some of their friends would start asking them questions. And my 3 daughters all trained in tennis, and we were a tennis family. And we would travel around, they would do their tournaments. And
now I get your Nadal reference earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Now I understand a little bit better.
Yeah, Nadal Federer.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know who Brian is between the
Yeah,
I'll take Nadal.
I'm not going to wager a guess here.
I'll let him take Federer.
I'll be Sampras.
That's
yeah,
good.
that'll be good. Yeah, that'll be good for me. So sorry, so you took your kids around, took them to tennis. Song never came on the radio. You never played and said, "Hey guys, you want to hear?"
Well, a couple. I mean, we were living in Spain for a while, and for tennis, and the kids were born in the Bahamas. That's where they were raised as young kids.
Yeah.
And but when they started to get in their teens, they started hearing songs, and some songs would come on the radio, and then they would see Daddy's on the radio, and they'd be smiling and stuff. But it was really like, it wasn't what I did. They knew that I was writing songs for other people, and they knew that I had a record company with Warner Music Canada, and that I was going to try and nurture and mentor some other up-and-coming artists. But no, they saw me home every day.
So why now? You've been very gracious talking about your career up to this point, but why is it time for new music now?
You should ask Bob Ezrin that question, because he's
the great Bob Ezrin, one of the
greatest
record producers of our time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mentioned my first 2 producers, Phil Chapman and John Astley, who were remarkable and taught me so much. And now I've just experienced another master at his craft, Bob Ezrin. And we met a year ago, and it was at a fundraiser, and I was performing a couple songs unplugged, just at the piano. And when I got off the stage, I'd never met him before, and he kind of grabbed me by the arms, and he said, "Because you're good. Like, what have you been doing? Where have you been?" And I pointed to the table, because my children were there and my wife, and I said, "Well, I've been busy doing that." And he says, "I'm going to call you. We're going to talk." And he looked over to my kids, and my kids were like saying, "Yeah, Dad did good." And anyways, we struck up a friendship.
Right.
And he was very pivotal in convincing me that it was time, because I respect him a great deal.
Was it hard to convince you?
Well, look, it was 20 years since I made a record, so I guess that it just magically seemed to be 20 years as the time frame. But no, once I decided I was going to do it, the songs just poured out of me.
How did it feel to be back in there making music again?
I loved it.
Yeah?
I had so much fun. I loved it.
You're I'm about to curse. You're a musician, man.
Yeah.
You've been doing this since you were like 11 years old. I understand that it would feel good to get back in there.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
I'm making something of the title of Dreaming Time Again, by the way.
Well, Dreaming Time Again is the name, it's the name of the record, and it's also about me dreaming again about my music, because I really did push it to the side. I didn't bury it, because I was still writing songs, but a lot less frequently than I would be if I'd continued making records.
Right.
As Jim Cuddy was asking me when he was in the studio and we were working on the song, he was saying, but didn't you want to just write more songs and just record? Like, didn't it drive you crazy? And I said, I had started writing songs when I was 13, 14, and I probably wrote 100 a year up until my mid-30s.
Yeah.
And then I just decided I was going to stop and put it to the side. But I had a bunch of songs piled up, but everything that's on this new record was written in 2018.
So you were writing a little bit during your time
A little
off.
bit, but mostly for other artists.
But it was never like therapeutic. It wasn't like, I had something on my mind, I want to...
No, making breakfast was more therapeutic.
Yeah, I understand that. I get that. I hear you on that one. And now you're going back on tour.
Yeah, and that I haven't done an arena tour since the 80s. So it's my fans. It's just Through social media, I'm not a big social media fan.
Good idea.
I think it's kind of a little disease gone rampant.
Aren't you happy it wasn't around when you started
Well,
out?
yes and no, because back in my time, I couldn't communicate with my fans unless Terry David Mulligan invited me on Good Rockin' Tonight, so I'd have a chance to talk to my fans.
Right.
Or, you know, I'd be on Friday Night Videos or something in the United States and have a little moment to speak to them. Now, you take your phone out, you can write a message and your fans know this is what you feel about something. There's a beauty to that. I think it gets abused, and I think the ubiquity of it is a turnoff. But if it's used to really touch the people that love your music and they can reciprocate with what they feel, it's a beautiful thing.
Speaking of a beautiful thing, Corey, not a lot of artists. You've been so gracious in talking to me about the early days of your career. It was really kind of you to reminisce with me like that, you know, and you don't have to talk about the early part, and I appreciate it. But what's remarkable to me is that when you come back for your farewell concert in Montreal, it's at a stadium, you know?
Yeah, well, is a hockey rink.
They're all stadiums to me.
Okay, yeah, it's big.
That's your fans out there right now. That's like someone very, very excited to have just one.
I sang 44 songs that night. I sang like 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
I only thought I was going to do one.
I saw you were acrobatic. You were jumping around.
Yeah, but my voice was yeah, that was bad.
I thought it was good. I mean, what I saw was good.
Thank you, but you know, it was something that I wanted to do for my fans because I just literally in 2000 disappeared. Never said goodbye.
So that's the point I'm making here.
Yes.
Is that how many artists can have the career that you had when you had in the 80s and still be able to do an arena tour across this country? It must feel amazing that people still love you that much.
Well, love you should never take for granted. That's for sure. So I'm dreaming time again. I'm dreaming time again.
I can tell.
Yeah.
So how's it going to feel when you get this honor at the Canadian Music Hall of Fame? When you walk across that stage at the Junos, how's it going to feel?
Well, you're going to need to ask me after I feel it.
How are you feeling about it? How are you feeling about having to do it?
I try not to think about it right now because when I think about it, I still get really overwhelmed, and I really want to just, you know, in life sometimes a special moment passes you by so quickly and you just want to grab hold of it and try and remember, and so that it's not some complete blur that you don't. So I really want to live that moment and not try and imagine what I'm going to say or what I'm not going to say or what I'm going to feel. I just want to live in that moment because it's such a special moment in my life for my family to see that, and for my fans that have believed in me for so long and stood by me when I was gone. And to be in that august company of Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and all those greats, Leonard Cohen, it's extremely humbling for me. And I will live that moment when it happens, and then you'll see how I feel, and I'll find out how I feel.
I'll come find you.
You come find me.
I will, and you're performing.
Absolutely.
Any idea what you're going to do?
Well, I'm going to do songs that I think my fans want to hear.
Right.
It's all about your fans. It's all about people. It's touching people and reaching people. I mean, I didn't want to become a songwriter to be famous. I wanted to become a songwriter because when I would listen to a Billy Joel song, it would move me. There would be lyrics in there. There would be melody there that I'd hear in my head, and it would make me happy, make me sad. It would make me feel emotions, and that's what I wanted to do as a writer. So I want, when anyone comes to see my concert or anyone sees that opportunity that I'll have on the Junos, is just to feel whatever those songs will bring back for them. You know, so mostly I'll play the older songs.
That's about all I have, but I was just thinking about something throughout this whole interview, is that, you know, we speak so often, and people get on about work-life balance and, oh, you know, my family is what's important to me, family is what's important to me, but they're rarely able to actually take the stop, to actually make that priority. And I just think it's I don't know if this is going to get in the interview, but I think it's actually really quite admirable that you made that decision for your
Thank
family.
you.
I really
Thank
do.
you. You know what? It doesn't make me a better dad than someone else that decides that they can balance the two, because it's a personal choice. But I know that you can't fabricate time.
Yeah.
And in the space of a creative person, if you let that creativity keep flowing, it not eats up, but it consumes so much of what's going on in your mind. And kids need patience, and kids need time, and they need patience when you have no more patience, when you want to throttle them. And it's just this symphony between parents and kids, and I did not want to miss that. And Julie and I, we never had nannies. We never had anybody take care of the kids. We did it ourselves, for better, for worse, and we would never have done it a different way.
How are they doing, by the way? What are they up to?
They're all murderers.
Yeah. They're all wanted by the law currently. If I can plead with law
they're all
enforcement.
juvenile delinquents. They're all dealing drugs. They're making a good living,
Oh,
actually.
that's good. They're doing all right. Yeah, they're funding their
They're on El
lives.
Chapo's guarded list.
Yeah. If anyone's seen them, you didn't see them. How about that? Yeah.
They're fabulous. I mean, what are dads going to say, right?
Yeah.
They are. They're fabulous. I hope you get to meet them at the Junos.
Me too. I'm looking forward to seeing you there again. Corey, thanks so much.
Thank you
Nice
so
to meet
much.
you. I really enjoyed
It
this.
was a pleasure. Thank you, sir.